I was 29 when my life went up in flames, and the match was lit by my own brother. My name's Malcolm, and if you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd go completely no contact with my entire family, I would have laughed in your face. I used to be the guy who showed up for every family dinner, every birthday party, every random Sunday barbecue, just because my mom said, "We're all getting together." I was the one who fixed Dad's truck when it broke down, who helped my brother move into his first apartment, who even co-signed his first car because his credit was a mess. Family was everything to me. Until the day it wasn't. I was engaged to my college sweetheart, Lila. We'd been together for almost 8 years. High school sweethearts turned partners, the kind of couple that everyone assumes will make it. We had the same goofy sense of humor, the same love of bad 80s music, the same someday we'll buy a house with a porch swing dream. We'd set a date, booked a venue, sent the save the dates. I was saving for the honeymoon while working long hours at a logistics firm, and I thought my future was secure. Turns out, the person I should have been worried about wasn't Lila, but my older brother, Grant. Grant had always been the golden child. If he got a C in school, Mom called the teacher and demanded extra credit. If I got an A-, Dad would say, "Why not an A?" It was subtle favoritism at first, the bigger slice of cake, the better Christmas presents. But as we got older, it became obvious. Grant could do no wrong. When he dropped out of college, my parents said he was finding himself. When I graduated with honors, they said, "Good. Now you can help your brother get back on his feet." Grant was charismatic, funny, and admittedly, he had that charm that made people forgive him too easily. I didn't realize until much later that he'd used that charm like a weapon. The first red flag came a few months before the wedding. Lila seemed distant. Nothing dramatic, just little things. Not laughing as much at our inside jokes, taking longer to text back, saying she was too tired to come over. I chalked it up to wedding stress. Then one night, my mom called me and said in that sharp, serious tone she reserves for family meetings that I needed to come over. When I got there, Grant was already sitting at the kitchen table, arms crossed, looking smug. Lila wasn't there. Mom said, "Malcolm, we need to talk about what you've been doing." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Grant jumped in, saying he'd caught me texting another woman, a coworker apparently. According to him, he'd seen my phone lighting up at a family dinner, taken it, and found flirty messages. I was stunned. Not only had I not been texting anyone inappropriate, but I never even let Grant near my phone. When I tried to defend myself, Mom shut me down. "Don't lie," she said coldly. "Lila knows." She came to us crying. I remember standing there, heart pounding, trying to call Lila to clear this up, but she didn't answer. 2 days later, Lila called off the wedding. She wouldn't meet with me, wouldn't talk, just send a single text. I can't marry someone I can't trust. My world cracked open. I begged her to hear me out, but it was like screaming into a void. The next thing I knew, Grant was suddenly supporting her through this tough time, which looked suspiciously like them spending a lot of time together. Every time I asked my parents if they believed me, they just said, "Lila deserves honesty. You brought this on yourself." 3 weeks later, Grant posted a picture of him and Lila holding hands on Instagram. The caption was some nauseating quote about true love finding a way. I showed it to my mom, furious, and she just said, "She chose the better son. Maybe this is for the best." That sentence is branded into my memory like a hot iron. The better son. Like I was some broken version of Grant that had to be discarded so she could be happy. That night, I packed a duffel bag, moved out of state, and stopped answering every call. I didn't just go low contact. I went ghost. I spent the next 3 years rebuilding from scratch. I threw myself into work, into getting promoted, into making sure that when people thought of Malcolm, they thought of someone competent, respected, and untouchable. But even as I moved up the ranks, even as my apartment turned into a condo and my savings account fattened, I couldn't shake the bitterness. I'd see their holiday photos pop up on Facebook, Grant and Lila at Christmas, Mom smiling like she hadn't helped blow up my life, and something cold would settle in my chest. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to hear from them. But I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to face Grant again, it wouldn't be as the little brother he lied about. It would be as someone who could look him in the eye without flinching. That chance came faster than I thought. 3 years into my self-imposed exile, my company merged with a smaller firm, and I got promoted again. This time to CEO. It was a whirlwind of handshakes, board meetings, and new faces until I looked at the employee roster and saw a name I hadn't seen in years. Grant. Same last name. Same smug face in the company photo. My hands literally shook as I scrolled through his file, seeing that he was a mid-level manager. My brother. The man who stole my fiancée. The man who ruined my relationship with my family. He worked for me now. I didn't tell anyone right away. I sat with it. Let the shock settle into something calmer, sharper. I pictured what it would feel like to see him again after all this time. To stand in front of him, not as the brother he humiliated, but as his boss. To watch his face when he realized who signed his paychecks. It was almost too poetic. And that's when I knew this story wasn't over. Not yet. When I finally saw Grant again, it wasn't in some dramatic showdown or at a family event. It was a Tuesday morning, and I'd been walking the floor to get a feel for the department heads I was now responsible for leading. I was dressed in a tailored navy suit, the kind of thing I never could have afforded 3 years ago, and feeling quietly powerful, like I had finally stepped into the life I'd been building brick by brick. And then I heard it. That laugh. Grant's laugh was unmistakable, loud, unfiltered, the kind that made everyone turn their heads even if the joke wasn't funny. I stopped mid-step, my pulse spiking as my brain caught up. I followed the sound and turned the corner into a conference room where a group of managers were gathering for their weekly sync. And there he was. Grant looked almost exactly the same, maybe a little heavier around the middle, hair cut short in that slightly too casual way he'd always favored. He was leaning against the table, holding court, cracking some joke about a client that made the rest of the room chuckle. For a moment, I was frozen, watching him like he was an animal I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted, not just with anger, but with something heavier, older. Seeing him brought back everything all at once. The kitchen confrontation, Mom's words, Lila's silence, the way my heart had felt like it was physically collapsing in my chest. I must have stood there longer than I realized because eventually someone noticed me and cleared their throat. Grant, one of the other managers said, the new CEO's here. Grant turned, and I swear I saw the color drain from his face. For one perfect, silent moment, we just stared at each other. His grin faltered, his posture straightened, and I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he tried to reconcile what he was seeing. I gave him the smallest, calmest smile I could manage. Morning, I said, my voice even. Don't let me interrupt. And then I walked past him, took a seat at the head of the table, and started the meeting like nothing had happened. That first encounter set the tone, but the tension didn't dissipate. It thickened. Over the next few weeks, I watched Grant closely. He tried to act normal, tried to pretend nothing had happened between us, but I could tell he was rattled. Every time I entered a room, he sat up straighter. Every time I spoke, he listened just a little too intently, like he was trying to gauge how much I knew. But it wasn't just about him. Seeing Grant in this environment made me realize just how deep the old family wounds still ran. My parents hadn't reached out in years, and now, suddenly, Mom started texting me again. I heard you got promoted. Congratulations, sweetheart, one message said. We should all get dinner soon. Grant says you look great. The hypocrisy made my jaw clench. Where was this energy when I was begging them to believe me? I ignored the first few texts, but they kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. Lila is pregnant, one read, like it was supposed to make me drop everything and rush back into the fold. You're going to be an uncle. The kicker came one Friday night. I was still at the office, going through quarterly projections, when my phone lit up with a call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. Malcolm, Dad said, his tone gruff. I don't know what your problem is with your brother, but enough is enough. Your family. It's time to forgive and move on. Grant's doing well for himself now, and he and Lila could really use your support. Be the bigger man for once. Be the bigger man. Those 4 words simmered in my brain for days. Be the bigger man, like I hadn't already been swallowing my anger for 3 years just to get through the day. Like I hadn't rebuilt my entire life from the ground up because of their betrayal. It wasn't enough that they had taken Lila from me. Now I was supposed to come crawling back, smiling, and play the role of doting brother and uncle? The next Monday, I noticed something that made everything crystal clear. Grant was terrible at his job. Not just needs improvement, bad. I mean actively negligent. He missed deadlines, pawned off his work on his subordinates, and spent more time in the break room than at his desk. The only thing keeping his department afloat was a senior analyst who clearly resented having to do her boss's job. One afternoon, I sat in on one of his presentations. It was a disaster, poorly organized, full of errors, and delivered with the kind of fake confidence that only works if no one asks follow-up questions. When I pressed him on one of his numbers, he stammered, gave a nonsense answer, and then blamed someone else. I felt the entire room go silent as everyone watched me, waiting to see if I'd call him out. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I started collecting information. Quietly. Carefully. I had HR pull performance reviews. I asked for department metrics. I scheduled one-on-ones with his direct reports and let them vent about how they hadn't had proper leadership in months. Every piece of evidence stacked higher and higher, building a picture not just of incompetence, but of entitlement. The same entitlement I'd grown up with. Grant had coasted his whole life on charm and our parents' protection, and now he was coasting here, too. Meanwhile, the family pressure ramped up. Mom called me out of the blue one night, her voice syrupy sweet. "We're having a little get-together this weekend," she said. "Why don't you come? Grant and Lila will be there, and it would mean the world if we could all be together again. Your father, and I think it's time to let bygones be bygones." I almost laughed. Bygones. Like they hadn't publicly humiliated me, chosen my brother over me, and cut me out of their lives until I became someone worth bragging about again. "I'm busy," I said flatly. "You're always busy," Mom snapped, the sweetness gone. "You can't stay mad forever. Life's too short." I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the city lights, the old anger mixing with something new, a sense of purpose. I realized that what I was feeling wasn't just resentment. It was clarity. I had the power now. I didn't have to beg anyone to see my side of things. I didn't have to prove my worth to my parents or to Grant or to anyone else. But that didn't mean I was going to let it go. The next morning, I requested a full audit of Grant's department. And as the results started rolling in, the story they told was exactly what I expected, and worse. Missing documentation, mismanaged budgets, clients unhappy with communication, even rumors of him taking credit for other people's work. I kept my face neutral when I passed him in the hallway, but inside, something cold and steady was forming. I wasn't going to blow up, wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. If Grant thought he could just coast through this job the way he coasted through life, he was about to find out exactly how wrong he was. And as fate would have it, the perfect opportunity to confront him and everything he'd done to me was about to present itself in a way that even I couldn't have scripted better. The day everything snapped started out so ordinary, it was almost insulting. A Thursday morning, a stack of emails, 2 back-to-back strategy calls, nothing out of the ordinary. I was halfway through reviewing a vendor contract when my assistant poked her head in. "Malcolm," she said carefully, "you might want to see this." She handed me a printed email chain. My name was highlighted, not just once, but several times, and the subject line made my stomach tighten. Leadership concerns, CEO's direction. I read the email slowly, line by line, the words digging deeper with every sentence. It was an internal message thread between a few department managers, but the first message was from Grant. "Look, I don't think Malcolm is the right fit for this role. He's young, inexperienced, and making decisions that could tank this company if we're not careful. I've heard from multiple people that morale is dropping since he took over. I'm considering taking this to the board if he doesn't start listening to reason." He'd CC'd several other managers, people I had just started building trust with. The replies ranged from hesitant agreement to open complaints, and every single one of them was now on paper, sitting in my hand. My first reaction wasn't even anger. It was disbelief. After everything, after stealing my fiancée, after ruining my relationship with my family, Grant was trying to undermine me at my own company. I could almost feel the walls closing in, the faint hum of panic at the back of my skull. If I hadn't been careful, if I hadn't taken the time to build relationships here, this kind of rumor could have been enough to shake confidence in me as a leader. I set the papers down, took a slow breath, and reminded myself that I had leverage now. Unlike 3 years ago, I wasn't the powerless younger brother being accused of something I didn't do. I could choose how to respond. But then things escalated. Later that afternoon, I overheard 2 junior analysts talking in the hallway. "Did you hear?" One of them whispered. "Grant said the CEO only got the job because of nepotism." Apparently, he tanked his last department, but the board owed him a favor. I froze. Nepotism. The word stung more than I expected. It was a direct attack not just on my competence, but on my reputation. And worse, it was exactly the kind of thing that could stick if left unchecked. I felt a hot rush of anger that made my chest tight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment replaying the day over and over, each memory sharper than the last. Grant's smug expression during that first meeting. Mom's voice telling me to be the bigger man. Dad's voicemail, practically ordering me to forgive. Now this, a direct attempt to sabotage me professionally. I thought about picking up the phone and calling him right then, demanding an explanation. But then I remembered how it had gone last time I tried to defend myself. The kitchen table, the accusations, the way everyone had already decided I was guilty before I even opened my mouth. No, I wasn't going to give him the chance to talk his way out of this. The next morning, I called HR and requested a formal review of all internal communications involving Grant. They hesitated at first. It was a bold move, but I had enough cause to push it through. When the report came back a few days later, it was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Grant been spreading rumors about me, but he'd been actively encouraging other employees to question my decisions, even suggesting they bypass my directives and run approvals through him instead. In one particularly infuriating message, he wrote, "Trust me, Malcolm won't last long. Just keep your heads down, do what I tell you, and we'll have a real leader in place soon." It was a coup. My own brother was trying to orchestrate a mutiny. As if that weren't enough, the same week I got the HR report, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "We heard you're being difficult with Grant at work. He told us you're threatening his job. You've already taken so much from him, Malcolm. Don't do this to your brother." I just sat there staring at the screen, my hand shaking. Taken so much from him? He was the one who lied. He was the one who took Lila. And now somehow I was the villain again. That message broke something in me. It wasn't just about Grant anymore. It was about the entire pattern. The years of being second best, the years of being told to just let it go, while my brother skated by without consequences. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. I didn't feel the urge to explain or beg them to see reason. Instead, I felt this calm, razor-sharp clarity settle over me. Grant had made this personal. He wanted a war. And this time, I wasn't the one unarmed. The next step was to gather allies. I started meeting with the managers he'd CC'd on that email, one by one, not accusing him directly, but asking pointed questions about their concerns. More than a few of them admitted that Grant had pressured them into agreeing with him, or that they'd only gone along because they didn't want to deal with the fallout. One of them even confided that Grant had been hinting about taking my job himself, saying the board would be more comfortable with someone who had been with the company longer. That was the moment I decided that this wasn't just going to be a warning or a write-up. This was going to end with Grant out of the company entirely. But before I could move, the final blow came, and it was one I never saw coming. One morning, I walked into the office to find a package on my desk. No return address. Inside was a framed photo. It was from my wedding that never happened. Lila and I standing in front of the venue we'd booked, holding hands, smiling like two people who thought the future was bright. Across the bottom of the photo, written in black marker, were the words, "Guess it worked out for the best. G and L." My breath caught in my throat. My vision actually went blurry for a second. He hadn't just sabotaged my job. He'd taken the time to twist the knife in the oldest wound I had. I set the photo down carefully, my hands shaking. And then I laughed. Quietly at first, then louder, until it startled my assistant outside the door. Because in that moment, all the fear, all the doubt, all the hesitation burned away. Grant had just given me permission to do what I'd been planning all along. And this time, there would be no coming back from it for him. When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on my couch in the dark, the photo still in my bag like some poisonous artifact. I couldn't look at it, but I couldn't throw it away either. It sat there, heavy, reminding me of everything I had lost, the life I was supposed to have, the family I used to think would always be there for me. For hours, I just existed. The city moved outside my window. Horns, footsteps, distant laughter, but I felt like I was underwater. My chest ached in that way it used to right after Lila left, like my ribs were too tight around my lungs. All those years of progress, of clawing my way back to some version of happiness, and in one day, Grant had managed to make me feel like that heartbroken guy again, standing in my parents' kitchen with everyone looking at me like I was a stranger. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't answer my phone when it buzzed with another message from Mom. Malcolm, you have to stop this feud before it destroys the family. Grant and Lila are happy. Can't you be happy for them? Happy for them. I closed my eyes and leaned back on the couch, letting the words dig their claws in. It wasn't just that they'd chosen Grant. It was that they expected me to celebrate it, to be grateful that my ex-fiancée and my brother had found love at my expense. I didn't sleep much that night. At some point, I found myself at my kitchen table with a legal pad, just scribbling names, dates, projects Grant had botched, employees he'd upset. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was just everything I'd been holding in, dumped onto paper. When I stopped writing, the page was a mess of ink and my hand hurt, but something in me felt lighter. The next morning, I woke up with that same dull ache in my chest, but there was also something new: resolve. If I was going to do this, if I was going to hold him accountable, it couldn't be out of anger alone. I had to be methodical, careful. The last time I tried to fight for myself, I lost everything. This time, I couldn't afford to misstep. I started showing up to work earlier than usual, staying later. I kept my interactions with Grant polite but brief, forcing myself to smile when he made some half-hearted joke in the break room. It was exhausting, playing the part of the calm, reasonable CO while my insides were a storm. Every night, I went home and did my research. I learned everything I could about corporate policy, about performance reviews, about the exact thresholds we needed to meet before termination could be justified. I knew if I handled this wrong, he'd cry favoritism, maybe even try to sue for wrongful dismissal. I wasn't just going to remove him. I was going to make sure there wasn't a single loose thread for him to pull on afterward. But even as I plotted, there were moments where the grief still hit me hard. I'd find myself staring at old photos, me and Lila at the state fair, me and Grant as kids in matching baseball uniforms. There were nights where I almost picked up the phone, almost texted her, almost asked her if it was worth it. But every time I got close, I remembered that photo, that smug black marker scrawl. At work, the pressure grew. The audit reports kept piling up, painting an uglier and uglier picture of Grant's department. Missed deadlines that cost us thousands, client contracts mishandled, even an expense report that hinted at him charging personal meals to the company card. I sat in my office staring at the numbers, wondering how he'd gotten this far without someone stepping in. And then it hit me. He'd gotten this far because no one ever stepped in. Our whole lives, Grant had been rescued by Mom, by Dad, by teachers, by bosses. People liked him, forgave him, gave him second and third chances. Maybe I had been doing the same thing, even now, by hesitating. That night, I stayed at the office long after everyone had left. The building was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC. I sat at my desk, pulled out the photo again, and set it upright in front of me. I stared at it until my chest stopped hurting. "This ends with you out of my life," I said quietly, my voice steady for the first time in days. It wasn't rage anymore. It wasn't heartbreak. It was a promise. The next morning, I met with HR again. This time, I didn't just ask for reports. I asked for timelines, for documentation, for everything we would need if things escalated. I asked legal to flag any compliance risks tied to his projects. I started drafting a performance improvement plan so tight he wouldn't be able to slip through a single loophole. At home, I made changes too. I blocked Mom's number, then Dad's. I logged out of social media entirely, deleted the apps from my phone. If they wanted to keep siding with Grant, they could do it without dragging me back into their drama. Walking away from them hurt more than I expected. There were moments, in the elevator, in the middle of brushing my teeth, where I felt like a little kid again, like I'd done something wrong and just wanted Mom to tell me it was okay. But I held firm. The part of me that used to chase their approval was gone. A few weeks later, I attended a quarterly board meeting. It was a big one: financials, projections, major strategy decisions. I knew Grant would be there to present his department's numbers, and part of me braced for the possibility that he'd try to throw me under the bus again. But when he stood up to give his presentation, something unexpected happened. He stumbled. Not just a little, badly. His slides were a mess, his numbers didn't add up, and halfway through, one of the board members interrupted to ask a clarifying question that Grant couldn't answer. I watched him flounder, sweat gathering at his temples, his confidence cracking in real time. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt quiet. Because in that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the older brother who'd always been one step ahead of me. Not the man who stole my fiancée. Not the villain I'd built up in my head. Just Grant. Flawed. Overconfident. And for the first time, I realized he was afraid. And that was when I knew my plan was going to work. Rock bottom wasn't the night I sat in the dark with that photo. It was the moment I realized how far he'd fallen without even knowing it, and how far I was about to make him fall next. The turning point came the week after that disastrous board meeting. Something shifted, not just in how I saw Grant, but in how the board and the other executives saw me. I noticed it in little things at first. The way the CFO lingered after the meeting to ask for my opinion on a restructuring plan. The way a few department heads suddenly seemed much more eager to align with my directives. It was as if watching Grant flounder had reminded them that I wasn't just the new CEO. I was the one holding the company together. I leaned into it. I started setting a clearer vision for the company, not just numbers on a slide deck, but something people could rally behind. I scheduled lunches with key clients, restructured a few underperforming teams, and made a point of being visible. Every morning, I walked the floors, greeting people by name, asking how projects were going. It wasn't just PR, it was deliberate. I wanted every single person in this company to know that I wasn't some untouchable figure in a corner office. I was invested in them. Slowly, I could feel the tide turning. Morale improved. Deadlines were met more consistently. Even the atmosphere in the building felt different, less tense, more focused. And with every small win, my confidence grew. Meanwhile, I kept collecting everything I could on Grant. Each missed deadline, each budget overage, each complaint from his direct reports. I filed it all away, building a case so solid no one could accuse me of acting out of spite. The senior analyst who had been carrying his department finally came to me one afternoon, exhausted. "Malcolm, I can't keep doing his job and mine," she said. "I've tried talking to him, but he just shrugs it off." I thanked her, asked her to document everything, and assured her I was handling it. The relief on her face was almost painful, like she'd been waiting for someone to notice. The funny thing was, the more I focused on fixing the company, the less Grant seemed to notice that the ground was shifting under him. He kept coasting, kept showing up late to meetings, kept making sloppy mistakes. It was almost surreal, like he thought nothing could touch him, even though I was now the one in charge. Outside of work, my life was leveling up too. The long hours I'd been putting in started paying off financially. I moved out of my modest condo and into a sleek apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. I bought a car I'd always wanted but never thought I could afford. I even started seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, just dinners and conversation. But it felt good to feel like myself again, like I wasn't defined by what had happened 3 years ago. I'd catch myself smiling sometimes on the drive home, thinking about how far I'd come. I wasn't the broken guy on the kitchen floor anymore. I wasn't the brother everyone dismissed. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and for the first time in a long time, I liked where it was going. But I never lost sight of the bigger picture. One afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with HR and legal to review everything we had on Grant so far. We went through the documentation line by line, and by the end of the meeting, there was no question. If I wanted to terminate him, I had more than enough grounds. Still, I didn't move right away. Timing mattered. If I was going to do this, it had to be at the right moment, in the right way, so there would be no doubt in anyone's mind that this wasn't personal. This was professional. And then, as if the universe wanted to give me a push, I got an email from the board chair. "Malcolm, we've been impressed with your leadership these past few months. We'd like you to present your long-term strategy at the next shareholder meeting." The shareholder meeting was the single biggest event of the year. Investors, analysts, major clients, everyone who mattered would be there. If there was ever a moment to make a statement, this was it. I spent the next few weeks preparing like my life depended on it. Late nights, early mornings, running numbers until they were flawless, rehearsing my presentation until I could do it in my sleep. I wasn't just presenting a strategy. I was presenting myself, the leader I had become, the one no one could accuse of being there because of luck or favoritism. The night before the meeting, I stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone home. The building was quiet, the city glowing outside the windows. I sat there with the lights dimmed, staring at the skyline, thinking about everything that had led me here. 3 years ago, I had been humiliated, abandoned, and broken. Now I was at the helm of a company, respected, feared even, and about to stand in front of an audience that included my brother, the same brother who had told people I wouldn't last. I pictured his face when I walked onto that stage. I pictured the moment he would realize that there was no saving him this time. No mom or dad to bail him out. No Lila to smooth things over. For the first time, the idea didn't just feel satisfying. It felt inevitable. The next morning, I put on my best suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I didn't see the Malcolm who had been left behind, who had packed a bag and run away 3 years ago. I saw someone who had built himself back from nothing. Someone who was ready. The shareholder meeting was held in the largest conference hall in the building. The place buzzed with energy, investors chatting, executives checking notes, assistants running around with clipboards. I walked to the front of the room and took my place behind the podium, my heart steady, my mind clear. Grant sat 2 rows back. I didn't look at him right away. I didn't need to. I could feel his presence, feel the weight of his stare. When I finally did meet his eyes, I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just held his gaze for one long, electric second before turning back to the room. "Good morning," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying over the room. "Let's talk about the future." And in that moment, I knew. The future I was about to build did not have a place for Grant. The rise was almost complete. All that was left now was to deliver the final blow, carefully, publicly, and in a way that no one could ever question. The shareholder meeting was the first time I truly felt the weight of my position, not just as a leader, but as the person steering the entire future of the company. I stood there with the presentation clicker in my hand, laser-focused, my voice steady as I laid out our growth projections, our restructuring plans, and the initiatives I'd been quietly putting into motion since taking over. The room stayed silent except for the occasional scribble of pens and the soft murmur of agreement from the board chair. When I finished, the applause was louder than I expected. It wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic. Investors came up afterward to shake my hand, complimenting the clarity of my vision. I caught Grant in my peripheral vision, standing stiffly near the back, jaw tight. He didn't approach me, didn't congratulate me. For once, he didn't have a snide comment ready. That reaction, or rather, that lack of one, told me everything. He wasn't just threatened. He knew the ground was slipping under his feet. Over the next few weeks, the power shift became undeniable. The board started looping me in earlier on decisions, asking my opinion before anyone else's. I was invited to a private strategy retreat with the top 5 executives, an event Grant was notably not invited to. It wasn't even me pulling strings. It was simply the natural result of his dwindling reputation and my rising one. But the most important piece of the puzzle fell into my lap one Tuesday afternoon, completely by accident. I was reviewing expense reports, part of the new oversight I'd implemented, when something jumped out. A series of transactions filed under Grant's department that had no clear business purpose. Catered dinners at upscale restaurants, electronics purchases that didn't match any approved projects, even a hotel stay in another city that wasn't connected to any client trip. At first, I thought it might just be sloppy record keeping. But when I had finance pull the receipts, the pattern became obvious. Grant was using the company credit card for personal expenses, thousands of dollars worth over the past year. Some of the charges even overlapped with his honeymoon dates. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, letting the weight of what I'd just uncovered settle in. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was grounds for termination with cause, and potentially even legal action if the company wanted to push it. I forwarded the file to legal with a short note. "Please review for compliance implications." The response came back within an hour. "This is a serious breach of company policy. If substantiated, it justifies immediate termination and repayment of funds. Recommend proceeding carefully to ensure airtight documentation." This was the leverage I hadn't even realized I'd been waiting for. But I didn't move right away. Not yet. Instead, I tightened the net. I had HR do a full audit of his department's card usage, cross-referencing every expense with client projects. I asked compliance to sit in on his next budget review, unannounced. I even quietly reassigned a few of his more competent team members to other managers, leaving him with a skeleton crew. And then, because timing was everything, I scheduled a mid-year performance review for him. In person, with HR present. When the day came, Grant walked into my office looking irritated, like he had better things to do. He sat down across from me, slouched back in the chair, and gave me a smirk that felt almost nostalgic, the same smirk he used to give me when we were kids and he'd just gotten away with something. I slid the first page of the report across the desk. "Grant," I said evenly, "we need to talk about your department's performance." He glanced at the page, then shrugged. "Look, I know we've had a few delays, but—" "This isn't about delays," I interrupted. My tone was calm, controlled. "This is about misuse of company funds." For a split second, I saw the mask crack. His eyes flicked down to the report, then back up to me, calculating. "You're really going to do this?" he said, voice low. "Over a few dinners?" "This isn't about dinners," I said, sliding the rest of the documentation across the table. "Every charge, every receipt, every date. This is about a pattern of behavior that puts the company at risk." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting to stick it to me. This is about Lila. Admit it." I didn't flinch. "This is about your job performance," I said, "and whether you're capable of meeting the standards we expect from a department head." HR sat silently to my right, taking notes. Grant's smirk faltered, replaced by something closer to panic. "You can't fire me. The board won't let you. They know what you're doing." "The board has already seen this report," I said quietly. "They authorized me to take whatever action I deem necessary." For the first time in years, Grant had no comeback. He just sat there, jaw tight, staring at me like he didn't recognize me. When the meeting ended, I didn't fire him. Not yet. I handed him a performance improvement plan instead, one that outlined every expectation in excruciating detail and set deadlines so aggressive that even the most dedicated employee would struggle to meet them. "This is your chance to turn it around," I said. He grabbed the folder and stormed out without another word. After he left, HR turned to me and said quietly, "That was restrained." I just nodded. "We're not done yet." Because the truth was, this wasn't about giving him a chance. This was about watching him sweat. Watching him realize that the safety net he'd relied on his entire life was gone. And as fate would have it, the perfect opportunity for the final act was just around the corner. The annual company-wide town hall. A live-streamed event with every employee watching, the single most public forum we had. I made sure Grant's department would be presenting their quarterly results. And I made sure I'd be the one holding the microphone when it was time to talk about accountability. By the time the town hall rolled around, everything was in place. The documentation, the board's approval, the compliance findings, an airtight case that no one could argue with. All that was left was to decide just how public I wanted this to be. And as I stood backstage that morning, watching employees file into the auditorium, I knew the answer. This wasn't just about firing him. This was about finally taking back everything he'd taken from me, my dignity, my peace, my place in the family. And I was going to do it in a way that he would never, ever forget. The morning of the town hall, I woke up before my alarm. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel angry. I felt sharp, like a blade that had been slowly honed over 3 years of quiet grinding. The plan was ready, every piece in place. Today wasn't going to be loud or messy. It was going to be surgical. I arrived early, before most of the staff, and stood at the back of the auditorium while the AV crew tested microphones and adjusted lights. The stage was set up with a long table for department heads to present their quarterly updates. I could see Grant's name card already in place. The sight of it made something settle inside me, a strange mix of satisfaction and finality. This was it. By the time the room filled, there was a hum of energy in the air. The town hall was always a big deal. Employees from every branch tuned in live, and the recording would go out to investors later that day. If there was ever a moment to make a statement, this was it. I started with the usual formalities: company updates, financial health, recognition for teams that had gone above and beyond. The audience was engaged, leaning in, nodding. The atmosphere was almost celebratory. And then it was time for department updates. Grant walked onto the stage last, looking tense but defiant. He had tried, I could tell. His suit was pressed, his slides looked more polished than usual, and he kept glancing at me like he was daring me to say something. When it was his turn to speak, I stepped back and let him take the mic. His presentation was better than usual, still sloppy in places, but he clearly put more effort into it than he had in months. He was trying to save himself, and everyone in the room could feel it. When he finished, I stepped forward again. "Thank you, Grant," I said evenly, taking the microphone back. "I'd like to talk a little bit about accountability." The room quieted. "One of the things we've been focusing on this quarter," I continued, "is ensuring that every department is operating at the highest level of integrity. We owe that to our clients, to our shareholders, and to each other." Behind me, the screen changed, not to the next department slides, but to a summary of the audit findings from Grant's department. Missing deliverables, budget overruns, compliance violations. Every bullet point backed by dates and figures. I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze on the audience. "These findings are not hypothetical," I said calmly. "They represent real lapses that have cost this company time, money, and credibility. And they require decisive action." There was a ripple of murmurs through the room. I let the silence stretch for a moment before continuing. "Effective immediately," I said, my voice steady. "Grant will no longer be serving as department head. A search for new leadership will begin today, and interim management will report directly to me." The room went so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grant stiffen. He looked like someone had just yanked the ground out from under him. I turned to face him at last. "Grant, please remain after the town hall to meet with HR and finalize the transition plan." He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, then shut it again when he saw the entire company watching. His face was pale, his jaw tight, but he nodded stiffly. I turned back to the audience. "This is not about punishment," I said, my tone even. "This is about accountability and ensuring that we are all working toward the same standard of excellence. We have a responsibility to each other, and that means holding ourselves and each other accountable when we fall short." When the town hall ended, there was no applause, just a heavy, charged silence as people filed out, whispering. The message had landed, not just about Grant, but about me. Afterward, HR and legal joined me in my office. Grant came in last, still holding the folder from his performance plan. "You can't humiliate me like that," he said, his voice low and tight. "You humiliated yourself," I replied evenly. "I just made sure the company understood why you won't be here anymore." "You think this makes you the bigger man?" he snapped. "No," I said, standing and meeting his eyes. "Being the bigger man was what I did 3 years ago when I walked away and started over instead of burning everything down. This," I gestured to the stack of reports on my desk, "this is just closure." HR took over then, going through the formal termination process. Grant sat there, stone-faced, signing where he had to sign, refusing to look at me. When it was done, he stood, adjusted his jacket, and said quietly, "Mom and Dad will hear about this." "They probably already have," I said. "But here's the thing, I don't care anymore." For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind him. I sat back down at my desk, exhaling slowly. It was done, but as satisfying as it wasn't noisy or dramatic. There was no shouting match, no grand scene. Just a clean, final severing of the last tie between us. And as word spread through the company over the next few days, something else happened. Employees started stopping by my office to say thank you. Not because they hated Grant, but because they felt heard, protected. It was a subtle but powerful shift. The revenge wasn't just about firing him. It was about reclaiming my voice, my power, my ability to decide what stayed in my life and what didn't. And yet, a part of me knew the fallout was still coming. From my family, from the whispers that were no doubt spreading through their group chats right now. And I was ready for it. Because this time, I had nothing to lose. The fallout started faster than I expected, less than 24 hours after the town hall. My phone lit up with a string of missed calls from my parents, back to back like an alarm I couldn't shut off. I didn't answer. When the voicemails came in, I listened to them once, just to be sure I was done with any shred of guilt. Mom's voice was first, sharp and accusing. "Malcolm, what on earth were you thinking? Firing your brother in front of the whole company? Do you have any idea what that's done to him? He's humiliated. You should be ashamed." Then Dad's voice, rough and clipped. "You're tearing this family apart. You could have handled this privately. Grant told us you've been targeting him for months. You've made your point, son. Now fix this. Fix this." I almost laughed. For years, those 2 words had been the burden I carried. The one expected to patch things up, smooth things over, make life easier for everyone but myself. I didn't call them back. Instead, I focused on work. The company needed stability, and that's what I gave them. We named an interim head for grants department, redistributed responsibilities, and in 2 weeks, performance was already improving. The board congratulated me for taking decisive action, and the shareholders sent a formal note of appreciation for the transparency. The whispers died down. People moved on. But Grant didn't. One evening, about a month after his termination, I was leaving the office late when I saw him standing by the building's front entrance. He looked different. Not polished, not smug. Just tired. His suit was wrinkled, his hair slightly disheveled. "Malcolm," he said as I approached, his voice low. I stopped a few feet away. "Grant, you ruined me," he said flatly. "No one in this industry will touch me after what you did." "You ruined yourself," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I just stopped covering for you." He stepped closer, his expression raw in a way I'd never seen before. "You got everything, you know that? The job, the respect, the title, and you still couldn't let me have anything. Not even Lila." At the mention of her name, something twisted in my chest, but I didn't let it show. "You didn't have Lila," I said. "You lied to get her. You burned me to the ground so you could stand where I was standing. And you know what? You still lost." He flinched like I'd struck him. For a second, I thought he might hit me, but then his shoulders slumped. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. "That's not my problem anymore," I said. "For the first time in our lives, you get to deal with your own mess. Maybe that's the best thing that could have happened to you." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the dark street. That was the last time we spoke. A few weeks later, I got a final text from Mom. "We're disappointed in you, Malcolm. You've changed." I stared at the message for a long time before typing a reply. Good. I was supposed to, and then I blocked her number. Life moved on. The company flourished under the new structure, and morale reached an all-time high. My name began circulating in industry circles as a case study for decisive leadership. One Friday evening, I stood in my apartment looking out over the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in my hand. The sun was setting, painting everything gold, and for the first time in years, I felt completely still inside. Grant was gone from the company. The weight of my family's expectations was gone too. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms. No apologies, no compromises. I walked over to the drawer where I'd kept that framed photo, the one with the black marker message that had pushed me over the edge. I took it out, looked at it one last time, and then opened the window. The glass frame slipped from my fingers, fell 12 stories, and shattered on the pavement below. And just like that, the last piece of the past was gone. I closed the window, finished my drink, and smiled. For the first time since the day everything fell apart, I felt free. Not just free from Grant, or from my parents' favoritism, or from the ghost of Lila, but free from the version of myself who kept trying to earn their approval. And as the city lights flickered on one by one, I knew with absolute certainty, I hadn't just survived what they did to me. I had turned it into the best thing that ever happened to me. And this time, there was no one left who could take it away.